First off, again, thank you everyone for coming out this morning. For those of you who were here or who were in Poseyville on Friday for our joint service, you make my heart smile. Thank you so much for coming out. If you don't know what we're talking about, we did a joint Good Friday service in Poseyville where we brought 5 churches together, Methodist, 3 independent, and then a Catholic church. So it's a pretty big deal. I mean, it's a small service, but the church is, unfortunately, we have a huge history of just breaking over silly stuff and disbanding. And so to get 5 churches to come back together, even a few times a year, is a pretty powerful sign, in my opinion. So again, yeah, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for coming here this morning. This morning, what I hope to do is, obviously, we're going to camp out on the resurrection. That's what Resurrection Day is all about. So what I want to do is try and trace the narrative all the way from Genesis to Revelation and see how does the resurrection of Christ fit into that? Why does the resurrection matter? Do I even have to believe this? Is this just sort of a nice wives' tale that stupid ancient people told 2,000 years ago? What do we do with this thing? So that's what I hope to do. And then we're going to end on, I'll just tell you out front, so the 2 main points of the resurrection are Jesus is Lord and new creation. So Jesus is Lord and new creation, and so hopefully I can develop those well enough. So the story starts out, as always, right? Genesis chapters 1 and 2, right? So Genesis chapters 1 and 2, God is the creator God, right? So it goes through the 7 days, whether they're literal or young earth, old earth, I don't care. Great discussion for another time, right? But the point, after each day, God says, it is good, right? It is good, right? And so God is the creator God who has made a good creation. And then he has set humanity sort of at the apex of that as his image bearers, right? And so our task as image bearers is to rule over creation in such a way that manifests the glory of God in creation. Or another way to say that, we are to steward God's good creation in such a way that in doing so, we reflect the nature and character of God. All right? So, good creation, humanity set on top of that. Then we get to Genesis chapter 3, right? And it all turns ugly because in Genesis chapter 3, the serpent enters the scene, tempts man and woman, they take the bait. The bait basically is, hey, I know you're made in God's image, but you can sort of do it your own way, right? I mean, so I know God said, don't eat from that tree, but it's just a tree, really. I mean, are you really going to die? Right? It's just fruit. I don't think so. See, God, He's trying to hold back from you. See, if you take from the tree, you'll know good and evil. You'll be like God, and you'll get to rule your own way in your own image. That is the temptation. And unfortunately, they take the bait, right? And in the next chapter, chapter 4, it's the Cain and Abel story, whereas in chapters 1 and 2, love and grace and mercy, they were the dominant forces in creation. Now murder, grief, envy, strife, those are the dominant forces. And I think if we just look around, it's pretty accurate, right? I mean, nations go to war against nations, right? Families go to war against families, like husbands and wives are constantly fighting. Your kids are constantly bickering nobody had to teach them that. They just know how to do that, right? I mean, nobody has to teach us how to do violence. We just know. It's in our blood. It's in our DNA. Nobody has to teach us how to choose ourselves over another. We just know. So what's God going to do? Right? What is a good God to do? Right? So he's got 2 choices. He can just sort of hit the red button, blow it up, and start again, or he can fix this good creation that has gone awry. He chose the second option, the latter option, right? And so God, not content to let his good creation go astray, he says from the very beginning, you even see this in chapter 3 where the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent, right? If you don't know what that means, just go back and read it. You'll see what I'm talking about. The idea that God is not content to let his good creation be wasted, to let it be led astray. And so God is on a mission to fix this good creation, right? Which includes you and me, right? The clay ones, right? That includes us. And so how's he going to do that? It's a great question, isn't it? Yeah. Without having to trace the narrative all the way through, ultimately God raises up, for whatever reason, and I cannot figure out why, it was God's image bearers, right? Humanity which led creation astray, and God seems heaven bent, I suppose would be the term or phrase, right? He is bound and determined that it will be image bearers who fix this creation, right? And so God raises up this nation, Israel, right? And he graces them with his law. And their task is to be a light to the nations. They're supposed to reflect the nature and character of God, right? And then in doing so, God would bless them, and all the nations would be drawn to them, and so that God's goodness would start at the temple and then flow out into all creation. Except they don't do the job. They don't succeed. Right? And so humanity, like human after human after human after human, tries and tries and tries, and for almost a millennia, Israel cannot get the job done. All right? And so then, I wouldn't say it's God's plan B, but what God does is he himself, he says, I want humanity to fix this, but they can't get it done. And so where they have failed, I will succeed. And so God himself becomes a human. That's Christmas, right? God himself becomes a human in the person of Jesus. Right? Do you feel that? Like, think about that. Like God, the God of all the universe, decides to leave heaven and descend and sort of condescend down into our level to become part of his own creation. And then, just like the king from the children's story, right? He knows that the only way he is going to defeat evil is that he'll have to give up his own life, right? He'll have to take the wrath due humanity. He'll have to absorb that into his own body. And so that's what we celebrated Good Friday. That when you read the accounts of Jesus being crucified, that is God taking the weight of humanity's sin, the weight of humanity's rebellion. That is God, all the brokenness in creation, every fight, every war, every cross word, every theft, every idolatrous heart. That is God taking all of that and absorbing it into his own body. That is the work done on the cross. And in doing so, he makes a way. Like, he redeems humanity. Right? The penalty that is due us, he absorbs it into his own body and buys us back. As if we were held hostage. He buys us back. Right? But he died. Right? He died. But in death he won, but that doesn't make any sense. Right? How does death gain victory? When you look at the ancients, they didn't just like us, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, because if you read through the beginning chapters of the Gospels, and all through the Gospels, you'll see that over and over again, these disciples, they're following Jesus, and what they want is a king like every other king. What they want is this great triumphal ruler who will come in and use force, right, and coercion and authority, and he'll come in and he will pounce on the evil ones, right, and then elevate the disciples to this glorified status, so they'll start their own empire. And that's not the way Jesus did things. Right? That's how the brokenness of the world works. But our true king, he came and he laid down his life. Rather than through violence and coercion and bringing in the tanks to set the world free, he died in place of the world. That's pretty powerful. And yet, had you been there in the ancient world, had you watched Jesus crucified, you would have been crushed. Right? Because you would have had two things. You would have been in the crowd cheering, or you would have been one of his disciples fleeing and crushed, because everyone knew. Every single person in the ancient world knew, like beyond a shadow of a doubt, with rock solid proof that Jesus was not the Messiah the day he died. That is guaranteed, absolute rock solid proof. The Messiah can't die because dead kings don't do anything. They're dead. Dead kings don't bring in kingdoms. They're dead. They just stay in the ground and rot and waste. Right? And so everybody knew on Good Friday, Jesus wasn't the guy. It wasn't him. But then Sunday came. Right? Then Sunday came. And so let me read you this account. It's a little stunted in Mark because we've lost some of the text, but it says, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might anoint Jesus' body. Right? So at this point, Jesus, he's been crucified, he's been buried, put in the tomb. To help you visualize it, the tomb would have been, at least the two that I went in, think of like a walk-in closet and maybe expand it. So it's about like a low ceiling, a cave cut into the rocks, and maybe a 10 by 10 room or so. And then you would have these holes that were cut into the wall. And so what they would do is they would put the body in. If a relative died, they would bring the body in, let the flesh sort of decay and decompose until there were only bones left, and then they go in, collect the bones, put them in a box called an ossuary, and put it in a hole in the wall. And so the family would sort of be buried together. So what Mary, the Marys and Salome are doing is they're bringing spices. They're preparing Jesus' body for that decomposition process, and then later they would come back, put his bones in a box, and then put him in the wall. Except when they get there, not what they expect. And so they bring the spices so they might go and anoint Jesus' body. And very early on in the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they're on their way to the tomb and they ask each other, who will roll the stone away from the entrance to the tomb? Right? So the way that, again, tomb works, you've got this cave, right? And you don't want a bunch of coyotes and wild dogs and stuff coming into the cave and eating your relatives and taking the bones away. So you got to build a wall. And so if you were poor, what you would do is you would just take a bunch of rocks and pile them up and make a door that way. If you had some wealth, and the guy who buried Jesus did, you would have a rock. And so it would be this round rock on a track. The track, is cut into the stone. And that you would roll the rock in front of the door and then roll it away. And now these are pretty big stones. Again, the one I saw was 3.5 foot, 4 foot tall, right, and about that thick. So pretty weighty, right? A big dude can probably move it, but a couple ladies, they may have some issues if they're petite. And so they come to this tomb and they think, well, who's going to roll the stone away? But then they get there and they saw that the stone, which was very large, it had been rolled away. And so imagine if you're there, you would feel some alarm and you would think, oh my gosh, somebody's raided the tomb. Somebody's gone after his body. Whoa, right? And so you would get that adrenaline flood to your gut, like when you drop in a roller coaster, right? And so, you're going to start to sweat and you're going to be nervous. And they looked up, they saw the stone is rolled away. And as they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side. And they were alarmed, obviously, right? But the young man who's sitting there, he says, don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. Look, see the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. and there you will see him, just as he told you." And trembling and bewildered, the women, they went out, they fled the tomb, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. And now, I would guess, just a quick side note, in most of your Bibles, well, all of our Bibles have Mark 9 through the end of the chapter. Though that section isn't found in the earliest manuscripts, it's probably not original. Most likely what has happened is the end of Mark has been cut off. And so we don't have it. What we do have in Mark, we see verse 6. Don't be alarmed, right? You're looking for Jesus who is crucified, but he has risen. He is not there. And so what does that mean? If you're there, right? If you're there in the first century and you're looking, you're watching this. You just saw this guy. All of Jerusalem came. They saw Jesus. They saw him die, right? They saw him nailed to a cross and a soldier shove a spear up into his rib cage. You don't survive that. And so if you're watching Discovery or History Channel, you see all sorts of wonderful and creative theories about maybe he wasn't dead, maybe they had a miracle drug, maybe he just resuscitated 3 days later. Okay, spear in the chest. I don't think so, right? I mean, none of those theories really work very well. And so everyone knows he's dead. Like, this guy is dead. Clearly, he's dead. And they also know dead people don't raise. Right? Dead people don't. Has anyone ever seen a dead person come back? No. None of the ancients had either, right? So they knew dead people don't rise from the dead. This wasn't just some sort of, they're just ancient people and stupid. They don't know any better. And so, no. They know dead people don't rise. Homer knew that, right? Dead people don't come back from the dead, except that this king did. See, this king did. And the resurrection, that is what started the church, because no one could ignore that fact. You can ignore a dead Messiah. You can't ignore a risen Messiah. And so what does that mean then? What does it mean that God raised Jesus back from the dead? What does that mean? First, it means, oh my gosh, he really was who he said he was. Right, he really was Israel's Messiah. He really was Israel's Christ, the one they had long been waiting for. He really was the guy. He really was the King of Israel, the one sent from God to save the world. And then all of a sudden, his death started making a bit more sense. And they're like, maybe we should have saw that coming, but not really. So it means he was the guy. That Jesus really is the one. The one that Israel had longed for. And if he is risen, and what we don't get in Mark, what we see in the other accounts, is the end of the story, right? Where Jesus, he rises from the dead, he sort of mingles around, and then he ascends where? Anybody remember? To the right hand of God in heaven. He ascends to the throne. So what does that mean? It means Jesus is sitting at the helm of the universe right now. It means Jesus, this God, human, fully God, fully human. There's a human at the helm of the universe right now, and his name is Jesus. So Jesus is the Lord of all creation, above every ruler, above every authority. He is at the helm of the universe. He is Lord of all. And the resurrection means a second thing that is huge. See, everybody expected, I shouldn't say that, many people expected that one day God would come back, set things right, and then raise everyone from the dead. Many people expected that. No one thought God would split it in half. Like, no one expected that one person would raise in the middle of history, and then God would delay and come back later. And so you see, at the resurrection of Jesus, Jesus rises from the dead as Paul uses these phrases like first fruits from the dead, or firstborn from the dead, right? Or the forerunner who has gone before us, right? So Jesus, not only through his death and resurrection did he become king, Lord of the universe, right? He points forward to what will happen to those who follow after him, right? To those who put their faith in him. His resurrection is the hope that one day we too might be raised from the dead, right? But when Jesus comes back, his body is different, right? Somehow he's not a phantom because he's going around, he's eating fish, right? And so people, they say, well, I saw Jesus, he was a ghost. Well, no, give me a piece of fish. Ghosts don't eat food, right? And Thomas, he says, no, I won't believe unless I see. And so Jesus says, here, look, you want to touch it? I mean, I still got the scar. You see, right? You see the scars, right? No. So he's got this real body, but he's also doing this weird stuff, right? Where he's like, he can enter a locked room without opening a door. I can't do that yet. Right? I mean, so his body, and then when he's on, some, like, people recognize him as soon as he says something, but at first, like, they don't. So if you remember on the story we always call the road to Emmaus, he's walking, and he comes up on these two dudes who are standing there, and they're talking. He's like, hey, guys, why are you so sad? Like, why are you all bummed out? And they're like, well, serious? You didn't hear? You didn't hear about Jesus being crucified? And then Jesus walks them through the scriptures, and at the end, they're like, oh, my God, it's you, right? And they're freaking out, right? And then he just, boom, disappears, and he ends up somewhere else, right? So what is this all pointing to? Jesus' resurrection is a first taste of the new creation that is to come. Remember at the very beginning I said God made a good creation that humanity has cast astray, right? But God is dead set, life set, he is set on fixing that good creation and doing it through humanity. And so God himself becomes a human, dies in the place to absorb the wrath, rises from the dead, takes the helm, right, the controls of the universe, because one day he will come back and renew creation. Right? This is Revelation 21. One day heaven will invade earth. One day, Christ will come back. He will destroy evil once for all. Right? And those who have put their hope and their trust in him, they will be raised from the dead with new resurrection bodies and a new creation where death, sin, evil, strife, envy will be no more. No more tears, no more darkness, no more destruction. Where love will be the dominant force in the universe. That is our hope. That is the Christian hope. That one day God will take this good creation and us with it, and he will resurrect creation itself. He will restore this creation, and we will get to reign with him in a new creation, free from evil, free from strife, free from conflict, where love and grace and mercy are the champions. Christ as our King, we as his faithful followers. That is our hope. That is what resurrection points to. And the invitation's open. Anybody can hop on this train. I mean, this is the ultimate bandwagon right here. Right? And so most of you in the crowd, I would guess most of you, this probably isn't new news to you. Most of you have pledged your allegiance to Christ. Some of you haven't. Those of you who have, man, get on board. Like, follow your King, because he was resurrected 2,000 years ago. New creation happened then. It started then. Right? It erupted into creation at his resurrection. So let's get after it. Right? Let's follow our King, where he lays down his life to save. Right? He lays down his life to rescue. And so you lay down your life for your God. Lay down your life for your neighbor. Get over yourself. Deny yourself and seek what is best for your neighbor, for the person in the pew next to you, or for the one living in the house next to you, for the one in Poseyville or in Mount Vernon. Like, follow your King, because new creation has started. And if you don't know Jesus, if you haven't pledged your allegiance, then come with us. Right? Well, this may be hard to believe, but don't you want to? Like, is there another narrative that fits better? I don't know of one. Right? I mean, we all want the world to be a better place. Right? And we all try and chase after. We all put our hope in something, right? We're all hoping in something. We're all chasing after something. And if your hope isn't in Jesus, then let me just ask you this question. Whatever it is you're hoping in, whatever it is you're chasing after, that you think is going to make your life better, that you think is going to make the world a better place, that you think will bring you happiness, whatever that is, money, fame, respect, a good career, a great family, those are all good things. Have any of those ever laid down their life for you? Or in fact, do they demand that you sacrifice for them? Because Jesus laid down his life for us. I don't know of anything else that has done that. And so I just invite you, man, follow him. Follow him. If you want to know more specifics about what that means, then I just invite you to, I'll be here. So come hit me up afterwards. Find somebody with gray hair, they can probably tell you. Yeah. So, Christian, non-Christian, whatever, let's get on board. Right? At the resurrection, Jesus became Lord of the universe, or at least he was fully realized in that role, and new creation began. And so let's get on board. Let's chase our King into his new creation and do whatever we can to manifest that new creation in this broken one as we eagerly await his return. Would you pray with me? Jesus, thank you that you are the one who came to our level. That you are not the God you are not the king, the ruler, who when his people went astray, left them to their own devices. No, but you are the God who chases, who woos, who pursues us, and who laid down your life to rescue us. You are our true King, and I just ask that you would get that through our heads, get that through our hearts, that it might work itself out in our hands and our feet. Yeah. And so I beg you for the courage to follow you wherever you may lead. We love you, and in your beautiful name we pray. Amen.